So this is the Beam Generation 2 everyone loves to talk about. Let me see what this little thing's got. I mean, it's seriously small. It can't possibly have power, can it? I mean, seriously. Oh my goodness, I think I just peed my pants. What the heck was that? I don't know about you guys, but in the grand hierarchy of first world problems, built-in TV audio ranks pretty highly. It's just terrible. It's flat, bass line, there's no lows, the highs and the mids are awful, and the dialogue just also sounds quite terrible. Thankfully, soundbars have become a very popular and kind of affordable alternative to high quality audio without breaking the entire bank. Now, with that said, of course, today's product is the Sonos Beam Generation 2, and in all fairness, it's been out for a hot minute, which makes this more so of a long-term review. I've been using it for a while, and I can give you guys a clear insight of what you can expect were you to get a Beam Generation 2 right now, and answer the ultimate question of whether or not this mid-range soundbar is the right one for your needs. So let's get into it. It all starts with design. In my absolute honest opinion, most soundbars just look outright ugly because most companies don't really care how they look. They're industrial, they're just more so for performance and aesthetics. Sonos has a very different approach. They really care about the way their products look, and that's one of the reasons they're such a successful brand. I mean, just look at the Beam. It's rounded edges rather than sharp lines with a more subtle but ultimately welcoming design, that seamless mesh grille that has a near 360-degree coverage, or the fact that you have a clean flat surface on the top with a very subtle curve and those minimalist icons that look so nice, or that clean LED indicator light at the top. All these things combined with a modestly small form factor make the Beam a very attractive looking soundbar that goes great with your living room, and combine the fact that you have two distinct color options, you've got the perfect combination of choices. Whether you keep it on a TV stand like I have or mounted, it fits nicely with most home theater setups. Now, one of the downsides with Sonos products in general is that your connectivity is often limited when compared to a lot of the competition. So on the backside, you do have a 2-pin port, of course, to power on the soundbar, the iconic join button, which allows you to nearly seamlessly connect to an existing Sonos system, and then of course you have an Ethernet jack in case you don't want to use Wi-Fi to connect to your network, and then the HDMI port, which of course has ARC and eARC certification, though you can also use it in the capacity of an optical audio cable. The dongle comes within the box itself. It is worth noting you do have built-in AirPlay 2 support. However, what's deeply concerning is the lack of a Bluetooth connection here. That's right, with the Sonos Beam and most of Sonos' soundbar products, you just don't get Bluetooth connectivity out of the box, which severely restricts a lot of third-party devices from using the Sonos Beam as a standalone speaker. Technically speaking, the Beam 2 is a plug-and-play product, so once you connect that HDMI connection, you're all good to go, though I strongly encourage you to get the Sonos app. It's got a clean interface that lets you see the device status, troubleshoot anything that's wrong. You can also, of course, use it to connect to your Wi-Fi. Additionally, you can issue over-the-air updates. You have a lot of settings to tweak the EQ, for example, and various other sound and system settings as well. You can also enable built-in integration with apps like Spotify or YouTube Music, and of course also enable the voice assistant that includes Google Assistant, Amazon Alexa, and Sonos' own VA. Now we come to one of my personal favorite features, TruePlay. Simply put, this is a sub-program within the Sonos app that calibrates the audio configuration of the Sonos Beam based on the dimensions and position of yourself in a given room. It's a quick test that takes no more than a couple of minutes. Once the calibrations are done, however, you will find that there is a subtle but notable difference in the quality and positioning of the audio, and this is quite important to make sure you get the most out of your speakers. The biggest downside is that if you're using an Android device, you are unable to use TruePlay. You can only use it on an iPhone or certain compatible iOS devices. Sonos claims this is because of mic parameter limitations. I think it's also a degree of lazy programming and also a lack of priority, which means some consumers get left out just because of their choice of phone. And I think that's kind of unfair to the consumer and definitely an area that Sonos seriously needs to reconsider. Let's get to the main course meal, of course, and that's the audio performance. So a quick recap, the Beam Generation 2 is Dolby Atmos certified. Additionally, it has a grand total of 5 speakers, 1 center tweeter, and 4 midwoofers, two on either side, which provides a balance of lows and mids, while the center tweeter, of course, deals with the highs and dialogues. And I gotta tell you, one of the signature features with the Beam Generation 2 is its dialogue clarity, which in my opinion outclasses its bigger brother, the Sonos Arc, visibly. Not to say that the Arc isn't great, it's far superior overall, but the dialogue clarity on the Beam Generation 2 is so crisp. I rarely have to use subtitles anymore. Of course, the mid-woofers do a decent job with the bass. They're not as good as the likes of what I find with Bose or even Samsung. However, generally speaking, there is representation on the low end, and it's sufficient as long as you're using it in a small to medium-sized room where the walls aren't too far away. As far as the Dolby Atmos goes, technically speaking, it's more of a virtual representation than a physical one because you don't have upward firing speakers. Despite that, however, when you're watching certain types of footage, whether it's rain in the background, an insect buzzing off, or a jet taking off, you definitely get somewhat of a degree of immersion around you in terms of sound, and that's pretty impressive given how small this thing is. It's not easy to put Dolby Atmos level speakers over here in such a small form factor. Generally speaking, this is a very well-tuned speaker, and as a standalone product, it does great in those kind of environments. A very common point of contemplation is whether you should get the larger and more powerful Sonos Arc or save yourself some money and get the Sonos Beam. And for some reason, a lot of YouTubers tie this to your TV size. That should be a secondary factor at most. What you should be looking at are the dimensions of your room. For example, I live in a townhome, and the Beam in my case is situated in my living room, so the overall width of my room is about 10 feet long and about 13 feet in length, give or take, and then my ceilings are about 10 feet high. This is more than sufficient coverage for the Beam 2 to encapsulate most areas of my room and provide decent sound immersion. Now, if you get too much larger than this, then the Arc might be a better option because the walls are further apart, so you need more audio horsepower to bounce back the audio and provide a true Dolby Atmos experience. However, you don't have to consider the Arc just because you have a 60-inch TV in a medium-sized room. In those cases, the Beam is enough unless you of course want that added immersion. You don't need to consider it. At the time of this video, the Beam Generation 2 goes for about $500 US. And this is a two-part perspective. I mean, on one side, you can now get Dolby Atmos at $500, which is a pretty good proposition. But on the other side, $500 is definitely trending towards the upper side of the mid-range segment. Now, the value proposition of the Beam 2 is entirely dependent on certain checklist items. First and foremost, making sure you have an iOS device, otherwise you can't use TruePlay, which I think is a pretty essential experience of the Beam 2 experience. And if you just have Android devices, you might want to look elsewhere. Additionally, of course, it's important to know that you don't get built-in Bluetooth connectivity, so you do have severe restrictions with the kind of devices you can connect directly to your Beam 2 if you just want to, let's say, listen to music. Thirdly, of course, is the fact that you need a very recent TV or a relatively recent TV that supports HDMI eARC to make sure you can actually get Dolby Atmos. Otherwise, you can save yourself some money and get a cheaper soundbar altogether. Now for the million-dollar question, is the Sonos Beam Generation 2 the best soundbar at the $500 price point? The short answer is no. I think that award goes to the Bose Smart Soundbar 600. That's right. The reason for that is because it actually has upward firing speakers giving you true Dolby Atmos versus the virtual one you get with the Beam Gen 2. However, it also has deeper bass, it's a little bit louder, and it's a more wholesome speaker that has Bluetooth connectivity all at the same price point. However, the one key advantage you do get with the Sonos Beam Gen 2 is modularity. Sonos has a ton of sound products that actually work seamlessly with one another. If you don't want to get a full-size woofer, you can get the Sub Mini, which is a fairly cheap subwoofer, and it adds a lot of bass without having to break the bank dramatically. The Sonos can be upgraded with so many different products, whereas the Bose and other companies are severely limited in that regard. It all comes down to just what kind of solution you want. If your ultimate objective is just to get a soundbar and call it a day, I do think there are other alternatives. Like I mentioned, the Bose Smart Soundbar 600 that might do a better job. But if you are looking to build an empire of a home theater system down the road as your budget permits, Sonos definitely has an advantage for it there, and it has some top-notch experiences if you meet the checklist items I mentioned before. Let me know what you think of the Sonos Beam Gen 2, and it's possible when you're watching this, the Generation 3 might be announced. Let me know what you think of that one in contrast to this. As always, thank you so much for watching. Catch you in the next one.